The locksmith handed me a new set of keys that no longer fit my own front door. The old lock had already been removed. My name was still on the deed, but the access was gone. 3 weeks earlier, I had met him because my car wouldn't start in the parking structure under my office building. I was standing there with my phone in my hand, already late, when he asked if I wanted help pushing it to a brighter spot. He didn't touch anything mechanical. He just organized things. Flagged down a security guard. Found jumper cables from someone on the 4th floor. Stayed until the engine turned over. Then he left without asking for my number. That mattered to me. I noticed restraint when I saw it. 2 days later, I ran into him again at the same garage. This time he remembered my name. Said it once casually, like it wasn't an effort. We walked out together. He worked nearby, freelance, flexible schedule. Younger than me by at least a decade. Clean, calm, unhurried. When I mentioned I had a meeting across town, he checked traffic on his phone and pointed out a faster route. No advice beyond that. Just information. He didn't pursue. He appeared. By the end of that week, we were having coffee in the mornings when our timing overlapped. He paid sometimes, not always. Asked precise questions. Not about my past, but about my day. What decisions I was making. What parts of my job drained me. When I said I was tired of carrying everything alone, he nodded once and said that made sense. He didn't counter it with optimism. The first time he came to my place was because I had food poisoning and couldn't drive. He brought soup from a place I liked but had never mentioned to him. He stayed long enough to make sure I ate. Sat on the edge of the chair, not the couch. Left before it got dark. After that, it was normal that he had a key. We settled into something efficient. He adjusted his schedule around mine. Picked things up without asking. Took over small decisions that freed up space in my head. When my condo association started a major plumbing project, he read the notices before I did and summarized what mattered. When I complained about the noise, he looked up temporary co-working spaces nearby and sent me links. He didn't tell me what to choose. I trusted him with my dog first, then my calendar, then with the apartment when I traveled. There were details I didn't question. He never used my guest bathroom, always the one attached to my bedroom. Sometimes his phone would go silent for hours when he said he was working, then light back up late at night. He never brought anything to my place that needed storage. No spare clothes, no toothbrush. It made him feel light, unburdened. One evening after a long day, I mentioned that dealing with the building management exhausted me more than my actual work. He said he could handle that for me if I wanted. He'd done it before. He spoke in specifics. Names. Steps. It sounded like relief. The paperwork came later. Minimal. Temporary. A convenience. The night before I left for a 10-day trip, he cooked in my kitchen like it was already his. Moved easily between drawers. When I couldn't find my passport in the morning, he located it on the counter where I'd set it down without noticing. Handed it to me without comment. I texted him when I landed. He didn't reply until the next day. When I got back, he was waiting at my place with the windows open and the lights low like he'd been there all afternoon. The dog ran to him before he looked at me. He said the building had switched the water schedule again while I was gone. Nothing urgent. He'd handled it. My suitcase stayed by the door for 2 days. I didn't need it unpacked. He had already done laundry while I was away. Folded it the way I did, not the way most people do when they're trying to be helpful. He noticed small systems and followed them. We didn't talk about the delay in his replies. There was no scene for it. He filled the space before it became noticeable. Cooked. Walked the dog. Replaced a flickering bulb I'd stopped seeing months ago. When I mentioned a deadline coming up, he cleared his schedule without being asked and stayed quiet while I worked. Brought me water. Set timers. Left the room when I needed silence. That was how closeness formed. Not through intensity. Through coverage. The condo association sent another notice. This one longer. More complicated. He read it out loud while I answered emails. Stopped twice to ask if I wanted details or just the bottom line. I chose the bottom line. He remembered that. At some point, it became easier to forward things to him than to read them myself. Maintenance. Billing. Scheduling. He answered some emails in my name with my permission, copied me on everything. His tone matched mine. Brief. Polite. Firm. When the association asked for a temporary point of contact during the renovation, he suggested using his number so I wouldn't be disturbed during meetings. It sounded considerate. Reversible. We didn't frame it as anything else. He never raised his voice. Never pushed. If I hesitated, he paused. Let the silence work. I filled it. There were moments that could have registered as strange. A package delivered that neither of us had ordered, which he said must have been a neighbor's mistake and took downstairs. A meeting he said he'd attended for me that didn't show up in the shared calendar, though the outcome matched what I wanted. The building manager started addressing emails to him directly. It felt efficient. One night after dinner, he showered in my bathroom while I cleaned up. I noticed he'd reorganized the medicine cabinet. Not move things. Group them. Expired items gone. Travel-sized bottles lined up by date. It felt intimate in a way I didn't question. Later in bed, he asked if it was okay to stay while I had an early morning. He didn't frame it as asking for more access, just less friction. I said yes. The next morning, I left before he woke. When I came home, the spare keys I kept in the drawer were gone. I assumed I'd misplaced them. He started talking about the place like it was a system we were managing together. Not ownership. Maintenance. Flow. When I mentioned refinancing options I'd been considering on my own, he asked questions that showed he'd already looked at rates. He didn't advise. He compared. The paperwork he brought me that weekend was thin. A single page. Temporary authorization to deal with the association directly, so I wouldn't be bothered, so I could focus. I skimmed it while he poured wine. Signed where he pointed. After that, things moved faster without feeling rushed. When I traveled again, shorter this time, I didn't check in as often. I didn't need to. Everything was quiet, stable, held. The building sent a confirmation email while I was gone, addressed to him, copied to me. I didn't open the attachment. There was no reason to. The change didn't announce itself. It showed up as fewer questions. He stopped asking what I wanted to do about things he was already handling. He updated me after the fact. Not defensively, just as information. The tone stayed calm, supportive. The same tone he'd always used. I noticed it first with money, not because anything was missing, but because things stopped landing on my desk. Association fees adjusted without discussion. A small refund applied to a future balance instead of sent to my account. He explained it in passing while we brushed our teeth. Said it reduced friction. I agreed. The condo renovation accelerated. More emails. More decisions compressed into shorter windows. He filtered them. I trusted the filter. When a form needed a signature, he flagged it with a sticky note and left it on my laptop. I signed between calls. Sometimes I didn't remember what I'd signed afterward, but the outcomes were always aligned with what I would have chosen. That alignment became proof. We started sharing mornings, not as a milestone, as logistics. As things appeared slowly, an extra jacket on the chair, shoes by the door that weren't guests. He never asked if it was okay. He just waited to see if I'd object. I didn't. One evening, the building manager called while I was in a meeting and left a voicemail asking for him. Not for me. Him by name. I forwarded it without comment. He returned the call from the kitchen while I finished my presentation. When I came out, he said it was handled. I didn't ask how. The form that mattered arrived the next week. It wasn't dramatic. No thick packet. No meeting. Just an email marked urgent because the association's legal team was changing vendors mid-project. Temporary gap. Someone needed authority to sign off so work wouldn't stall. He explained it while making coffee, voice steady, like he was reading a weather report. It was framed as protection. Of time. Of continuity. Of me not having to drop everything for something he already understood better than I did at that point. He didn't rush me. Left the document open on the screen and went to walk the dog. When he came back, I was still sitting there. He didn't watch me sign. He trusted I would. I did. After that, the rhythm shifted. Not abruptly. Subtly. He became busier. Meetings I wasn't part of. Calls he took in the other room. Still attentive. Still kind. But less available. Less waiting. When I asked about it, he said it was temporary. This phase would pass. He was just caring more now, so I didn't have to. He reminded me of how exhausted I'd been before. He was right. There were small absences. Dinners he missed. Messages answered hours later. He always followed up with something practical. An update. A solved problem. It made the absence feel justified. I traveled again, this time for work, and left earlier than planned. He didn't come to the airport. Said he had an early call tied to the building. He texted when I landed. A summary of what had happened while I was in the air. Nothing I needed to respond to. While I was gone, the association sent a notice confirming receipt of documents. Addressed to him only. I saw it because he forwarded it as an FYI. I didn't reply. When I returned, the apartment was clean in a way that felt finished. Not maintained. Reset. Drawers aligned. Personal papers stacked neatly in a box on the desk, labeled. My name written in his handwriting. He wasn't home yet. On the counter was a single envelope, also labeled. Same handwriting. It contained copies of documents I recognized. Signed. He came back late that night. Not apologetic. Not rushed. He set his phone down face up on the counter and asked if I'd eaten. When I said yes, he nodded and poured himself a glass of water. He didn't look at the envelope. I asked what the documents were for. I didn't raise my voice. It wasn't that kind of question. He said they were copies from my records. He said it was cleaner this way. Then he added that the association had needed clarity, and now they had it. I asked what it meant. He didn't answer immediately. He rinsed the glass, wiped the counter where there wasn't a spill, said the project was finally moving forward without delays, said I wouldn't be pulled into emails anymore, said it was working the way we'd intended. That night he slept on his side of the bed, back to me. Not distant, just closed. In the morning he was gone before I woke up. No note, no text. The dog's leash was missing from the hook. I started opening the box on the desk. It wasn't dramatic, just paper, stacked carefully, correspondence, authorizations, confirmations, all things I'd seen before but not together. My signature repeated in places I didn't remember seeing it. Dates close enough to blur. I called the building manager. He answered politely and asked if I was calling on behalf of him or myself. I said myself. There was a pause. He said he thought everything was already handled. After that, communication shifted away from me. Not aggressively, simply by default. Replies came slower. When they came, they were copied to him, not addressed to me. When I corrected that, the tone changed. Shorter, more formal, as if I were interrupting a process already in motion. At home, he stayed present but not available. Still made dinner. Still walked the dog. But the questions didn't return. He didn't ask how my day was. He informed me what had happened during it. What had been approved. What was next. One evening, I asked if we could sit down and go over everything together. He said there wasn't much to go over. It was all documented. He said that calmly, like it was reassurance. I stopped forwarding emails. I started reading them again myself. The language was dense but clear enough. Authority, representation, interim control, temporary but without a defined end. Everything was framed as protection, efficiency, continuity. When I asked him why my name wasn't primary anymore, he said it was procedural, that it didn't change ownership, that I was safe. He used that word once. Safe. It landed wrong. He started taking calls outside, on the balcony, in the car. If I entered the room, he'd lower his voice, not hide it, just adjust. I stopped asking who he was talking to. The dog began waiting by the door in the mornings. He didn't always come back at night. When he did, it was later than before. He slept lightly, phone always charging on his side of the bed. One weekend, I tried to log into the association portal and couldn't. The password had been changed. I used the recovery option. The reset email never came. When I mentioned it, he said he'd already taken care of access issues. He said we could look at it later. He said there was no urgency. That was the word he used when I asked why my keys no longer worked. No urgency. I didn't call a locksmith again. I sat in my car and watched the building long enough to learn the pattern of the lights. Which units were occupied? Which ones weren't? When someone entered, the door opened smoothly. When I tried, it didn't. He didn't answer my calls. He sent a message instead. Said he was in meetings. Said we'd talk later. He didn't ask where I was. I went to a hotel nearby. Not far. Somewhere practical. I laid my coat over the chair and plugged in my phone and opened the folder of documents he'd labeled for me. I read them slowly this time. Not scanning. Not trusting the shape of things. Authority wasn't ownership. That part was true. But authority moved money. Authority decided access. Authority instructed vendors and redirected notices and approved changes. Authority didn't need to ask again once it was granted. The next morning, I went back to the building and asked to speak to the property manager in person. He met me in the lobby and shook my hand like we'd never met before. He said he'd been told everything was handled. He said it was all very clear on their end. I asked him to pull up my file. He did. Turned the screen slightly so I could see. My name was there. Not first. Not primary. Listed as owner but not contact. Not decision maker. He said it could be adjusted but it would take time. There were processes now. Signed authorizations. I asked who requested the lock change. He checked. Didn't hesitate. Gave the answer like it was obvious. I asked for copies. He said they'd already been sent. To him. When I left the office, my phone finally rang. I didn't answer it. He left a voicemail instead. His voice was calm. Familiar. He said we didn't need to escalate things. He said this was exactly why he'd taken over. So I wouldn't have to feel like this. That afternoon, the association emailed me for the first time in days. Short message. Neutral tone. They'd been informed that all communication should go through him moving forward. They apologized for any confusion. I replied that there was confusion. They didn't respond. I went back to the condo in the evening and waited across the street. I watched him arrive with the dog. He had a bag of groceries in one hand, keys in the other. He didn't look around. He didn't hesitate. When he unlocked the door, the light came on immediately, like it always had when I used to come home. I didn't follow him inside. Later that night, I checked my bank app. Not because I expected something dramatic, because I wanted to understand the edges of what had shifted. The balances were there, the accounts intact, but several notifications were pending. Administrative changes, contact updates, preferences. Nothing illegal, nothing sudden, just quiet movement. He texted once more before midnight. Said he hoped I was somewhere comfortable. Said we could sort everything out when things slowed down. He added that he'd made sure the dog was fed. The email arrived at 6:12 a.m. It wasn't from him. It was from the association's legal office. Short subject line. Neutral language. Confirmation of updated representation. Effective immediately. Attached was a notice. 1 page. Clean formatting. It stated that, per the executed authorization on file, all access credentials, vendor coordination, and financial disbursements related to the unit would be managed by the appointed representative until further notice. My name appeared once. In the section titled Owner of Record. I forwarded it to my attorney. She replied an hour later and asked when I had signed. I gave her the window. She asked if I remembered the conversation. I said yes. She didn't ask what was said. She asked where I was when I signed. I told her. My kitchen. Wine open. He was there. She said it would take time. By the time I got back to the building that afternoon, the front desk already had instructions. No replacement keys without written approval. They were polite, apologetic. They offered to call him. I said no. I waited in the lobby long enough to see him come down the elevator alone. He didn't look surprised to see me. He said my name once quietly like he always had. He asked if I wanted to talk somewhere calmer. I asked for my keys. He said that wasn't possible right now. I asked about the dog. He said the dog was fine. Settled. He'd adjusted well. I asked when I could come home. He paused then, just long enough to register. He said we'd crossed into a phase where home was complicated. He said it would be better if communication went through the appropriate channels until things stabilized. I asked if he was ending this. He didn't answer the question. He said he hadn't disappeared. He said he was still taking care of things. He said this didn't have to be adversarial. Then he stepped back into the elevator and pressed the button without looking at me. That evening, my attorney confirmed what I already knew. The documents were valid. The access change was compliant. The path back would involve formal notices, hearings, time. The word temporary appeared often, but without a timeline. I went back to the hotel. Same room. Same chair. I opened my laptop and tried to log into everything I could think of. Some worked. Some didn't. Password resets went to an email address I didn't recognize. At midnight, a delivery notification came through. Groceries. Scheduled weekly. Charged to my account. Delivered to my address. His address now. The next morning, the dog's vet emailed me. Routine update. Change of primary contact confirmed. I unsubscribed from the building's mailing list. The option was still available to me. For now. When I checked out of the hotel, I realized I didn't know where to go next. Everything I owned was still intact. Still there. Behind a door I no longer opened. The last message from him came 2 days later. One sentence. No greeting. This is moving faster than I expected. I'll have someone reach out. No one did. The lock on my phone screen went dark. And for the first time in years, I didn't know where my dog was sleeping.